Hello, my name is Nora Vale. And 5 minutes before the world found out who I really was, my own parents called me poor trash in the lobby of the hotel I built. They didn't recognize me. Not their daughter, not the woman who paid for every inch of marble under their feet. They told security to throw me out, and I let them. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't raising your voice, it's signing the papers that decide who stays and who doesn't. And when I did, their names were already waiting on the termination list. Tell me, what would you have done? It was a humid evening in Charleston, the kind of southern heat that clung to silk and skin alike. The air outside the Jasper Ballroom shimmered under the lantern strung above the marble steps, and laughter rolled through the open doors. I parked my own car on the street instead of pulling into the valet line. It wasn't pride, it was precaution. I didn't want anyone announcing my name. When I reached the check-in booth, a young man in a black vest gave me the same smile he probably gave every woman over 30 who came alone. Good evening, ma'am. Name, please. Molly Durant. I said it softly, already knowing what would happen. His fingers clicked across the keyboard, his brows knitting together. Durant, Durante. Yes, I replied, even though it didn't matter. He glanced at the list again, then offered an apologetic grin. I'm sorry, Miss Durant. You're not listed for tonight's gala. I nodded once. That's all right. He looked surprised that I didn't argue, but what could I say? This wasn't the first time my own family had forgotten to include me. I stepped aside, smoothing the crease of my dress, and walked through the side entrance. I had learned long ago that a quiet entrance gives you time to study the room before it studies you. The ballroom smelled of champagne and money. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across polished wood floors. Women in pastel gowns swayed beside men whose laughter sounded rehearsed. The string quartet played something soft, Debussy, maybe, but beneath the music was that southern hush of polite cruelty. People here didn't raise their voices, they raised their eyebrows. Across the room, my mother stood near the main table. Vera Liness was impossible to miss. Even in her 60s, she held herself like royalty who never lost a crown. Her pearls gleamed against a cream dress, her hair a sculpted wave of silver. She was smiling, but not warmly, the smile of a woman who measures worth in applause. When her eyes found me, I froze. For a fleeting moment, I thought she recognized me. But then she waved her hand, impatient, and called out, "Be a dear and refill these glasses, will you? Table 6 is dry." I looked at her, at the glasses, then at the waiter standing 2 steps away. He hesitated, unsure if she meant him or me. My mother didn't wait for clarification, she turned back to her conversation with a laugh. I took the glass anyway. I didn't say a word. My heels clicked softly against the floor as I walked toward the bar. In my head, her voice from years ago echoed, "A lady doesn't make scenes, Molly. Silence is elegance." Fine, I thought. Tonight, I'm elegance. At the bar, the bartender raised a brow. Top off. Just sparkling water, I said. I needed something clear, something that wouldn't stain if I spilled it. From behind me, I heard laughter. Isidore, my brother, was greeting a group of investors. He looked every inch the charming southern gentleman, shaking hands, making eye contact, saying everyone's name as if they were old friends. He had mastered the art of being adored. Isidore Liness, one of the men boomed. Your family throws the best events. Thank my mother for that, he replied with his perfect grin. She knows how to keep the right people happy. I felt my stomach twist. The right people. I used to think that meant investors, donors, partners. But in my family, right simply meant not me. I handed the full glass to a passing waiter and walked toward the balcony. The air outside was heavy but honest. Inside, everything smelled of power and pretense. I could still see them through the glass doors, my mother, glowing beneath the chandelier, my brother, shaking hands like a senator. The crowd clung to them, not knowing that the woman they dismissed owned a third of the funds sponsoring this very event. Argent Capital, my company, had quietly underwritten the renovation of this historic hall. My name wasn't on the banner, but my signature was in the foundation's ledger. At 37, I had stopped wanting credit. I wanted clarity. A waiter passed by, his tray glittering with wine glasses. I caught his arm gently. Could I borrow your pen for a moment? He blinked, confused, but handed it to me. I pulled a small card from my clutch, the invitation that had never carried my name, and drew a single line across it. Sometimes erasing feels better than being seen. When I turned back, my mother was laughing with Delphine Mercer, a rival investor I knew well. Delphine had always known how to flatter Vera. She called her mentor in public, useful relic in private. The sight almost made me smile. I glanced at the clock near the entrance, 7:45. The night had only begun, yet it already felt long. I decided to circle the ballroom once more before leaving. As I walked past the tables, a server brushed my arm and whispered, "Ma'am, this area is for staff only." I looked at him. He looked embarrassed. "Oh, I'm sorry," I thought. "It's fine," I said quietly. "You're not wrong." For a moment, I imagined my younger self standing where he stood, apologizing for existing. At 22, I'd been told during an internship dinner, "You're good with numbers, sweetheart, but this world isn't built for girls like you." The man who said it later hired my brother. A string of applause erupted near the stage. Isidore was giving a short toast, glass raised high. "To family legacies," he said. "And to the future we continue to build together." Laughter. Cheers. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin, pretending to be moved. I wanted to leave. But leaving would mean surrendering the narrative again. Instead, I drifted toward the service corridor, away from the cameras. My phone buzzed inside my clutch. A message flashed on the screen, "Stand by." I typed back 2 words, "Yes, ma'am." When I looked up, my reflection in the hallway mirror stared back, calm, composed, anonymous. The woman everyone overlooked was still here, and she wasn't walking away this time. Back in the ballroom, my mother raised another glass, oblivious. The chandelier light bounced off her pearls, casting small, sharp sparks across the walls. I stepped into that light. And yet, no one, not even my own mother, saw it coming. I turned slowly, looked him in the eyes, and he didn't even blink. That was my father. No hesitation. No flicker of doubt. Just pure, unfiltered dismissal. I stood frozen for a beat too long, pretending I was trying to process the question, when really I was just absorbing the audacity. This wasn't an isolated moment, it was confirmation. Confirmation that no matter how far I had come, in their eyes, I hadn't moved at all. Table 7, he repeated, louder this time. There's a spill. Don't just stand there. His voice carried through the lobby like a dropped glass, sharp and attention-grabbing. I didn't respond. I didn't even twitch. I turned away, heels firm against the marble, and moved behind the concierge desk like I had something to do, like I wasn't about to break open from the inside out. The desk staff, mostly younger faces hired within the last 6 months, barely looked up. They didn't know me, not the way the board did. Not the way Miguel did. But maybe that was the point. To them, I was just another woman walking with too much purpose and not enough importance. From that angle, I could see the bar, and beyond it, the alcove where my family had settled like royalty in exile, occupying space they didn't pay for, enjoying service they didn't acknowledge, and speaking louder than their surroundings demanded. It was that particular brand of southern arrogance, soft vowels and sharp edges. Vera, my mother, leaned across the table toward Isolde, who was swirling a cocktail with the practiced flair of someone who knew she was being watched. I swear, the youngest one, what was her name again? Nora. She vanished with that dropout years ago. Thank God. Could you imagine if she showed her face now? What would we even say? Isolde snorted, her voice just as pointed. She'd probably claim she was here on business. Or worse, say she owned something. Laughter. The kind that cuts deeper than anger. Then Tobrin chimed in, because of course he did. I bet she's waiting tables somewhere out west. That, or married to someone who does. She always thought she was smarter than the rest of us. My jaw locked. I squeezed the edge of the desk with my left hand. The pressure grounded me, just enough to keep the urge to scream buried beneath the surface. That's the thing with emotional injuries from family, you build scar tissue. Thick. Tough. But under the wrong light, at the wrong moment, it still stings. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I pulled my phone from the inside of my clutch and opened the guest reservation app. Their room, 2701, was listed under Isidore's corporate account, of course. Paid in full by the same foundation that bore my name on its silent partnership clause. They didn't know I was there the day that wing of the hotel opened. They didn't know I personally reviewed the finishes. They didn't know I approved the wine list, the linens, the security system. To them, I was the youngest one who vanished. Excuse me, miss, a concierge whispered, gently tapping my arm. Would you like assistance with something? I shook my head slowly. No, thank you. I'm just watching. And I was. Watching my mother lift her glass in a silent toast to the delusions they all agreed to believe. Watching Isolde fix her lipstick in the reflection of a champagne bucket. Watching Tobrin complain about the humidity, even though he lived in Florida. It was like watching a play I'd seen too many times, same lines, same smug faces, same act of erasure. Only now, I owned the theater. A disturbance broke the rhythm. Alton was waving at a manager, one of our newer hires, about their room assignment. This suite isn't in the main wing, he barked. We specifically requested a view of the harbor. What kind of place are you people running here? The manager was visibly flustered, flipping through a tablet, trying to appease him. I saw it unfold in real time, like slow-motion indignation. Then Verena stood up, pointed directly at me, and said, she was the one standing around earlier, wasn't she? Probably her fault. I stepped forward, just enough to be heard, but not enough to dominate. "I'm not part of the front desk team," I said, voice even, measured. Isolde leaned back in her seat with a smirk. "Exactly. Just standing. Not even useful." The words hit like ice water, but I let them settle. No flinch. No defense. Let them talk. Let them reveal themselves. People like them always do. I turned back toward the desk, pretending to check something on the screen. My fingers hovered over the terminal I helped design 2 years ago, back when we rebuilt the guest flow software from the ground up. I knew every screen, every shortcut, every override. I could have ended their stay with 3 taps. But not yet. They weren't finished digging their own grave. And I wasn't done watching. There's something uniquely American about letting people underestimate you until the moment they realize you built the ground they're standing on. And my family. They were going to feel that ground shift very soon. The lobby lights shifted slightly as the sun outside dipped lower, the chandeliers casting gold halos against the darkening windows. I slipped into the side hallway, unnoticed again. The same way I came in. Just before the corridor curved, I heard a final comment from my mother, drifting through the air like perfume you didn't ask for. "If I didn't know better," she said, "I'd swear she followed us here just to cause drama." I paused. Then I smiled. I didn't turn back. I didn't roll my eyes or laugh or say anything clever. That's what they would have expected, maybe even hoped for, a scene. But I'd learned that silence draws blood cleaner than shouting ever could. I walked past the front desk and into the vestibule, letting the cold air outside bite at my skin. The lobby doors closed behind me with a slow hush, as if even they knew to keep quiet. For a moment, I just stood there, under the awning of the hotel entrance, letting the sharp November chill press against the heat that had begun to rise inside me. The street was quiet. Late-night cars hummed by, headlights flickering on the pavement like falling stars. Across the avenue, a couple was laughing softly as they walked their dog. Ordinary lives, untouched by the kind of familial poison I'd spent years trying to detox from. I leaned against the stone pillar by the entrance, taking a deep breath through my nose. That's when it came back, not a thought, not a word, but a sound. A nickname. One I hadn't heard in nearly 20 years. And yet, just minutes ago, I'd heard it again, slipping out of my mother's mouth like it had never left. "Mayrac," she had said, with a light laugh to match her whine. That girl, Mayrac, I wonder if she ever made it out alive. She wasn't talking to me. She didn't even know I was close enough to hear her. That name had always been her joke. Trash. Garbage. Waste. Rack was something she used half in jest and fully in belief. Whenever I failed a piano lesson, whenever I wore something she didn't approve of, whenever I wasn't who she needed me to be. It started one Christmas when I was 10. I spilled cranberry sauce across the white linen tablecloth. The whole table froze. My father barked something gruff, but it was my mother who delivered the real blow. "Mayrac," she said, shaking her head, her fork dangling between her fingers. Even the dog would have had more grace. The name stuck. Isolde repeated it at school once, and it followed me into adolescence like a shadow. My real name faded into the background, only summoned when it was time for lectures or punishments. And now, after everything, after degrees, after businesses, after blood and rebuilds, she still used it. I didn't go back inside right away. I walked the perimeter of the building instead. The kitchen loading dock buzzed as staff unloaded produce for the next morning. One of the sous chefs nodded at me in recognition. I returned the nod but didn't stop. I wasn't ready to be recognized, not yet. By the time I circled back around to the guest entrance, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to react to words anymore. That game was beneath me now. But actions would be different. As I stepped back inside, the warmth of the lobby hit me like a lie. A forced smile on a cold face. A delivery attendant was standing near the front desk, holding a beautifully wrapped basket, gold ribbon, dark wine, fresh pears, rare chocolates. I knew it well. I had ordered it myself. A gesture. An olive branch, anonymous and subtle, addressed simply to guests of the executive floor. I watched from the corner as Verena, still adorned in pearls and perfection, took one glance at it and wrinkled her nose. "Remove this," she said flatly. "Feels cheap." The concierge hesitated. "It's a complimentary welcome from our executive team." She cut him off with a dismissive wave. I said, "Remove it. We don't need handouts." The concierge bowed slightly and carried it away. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just reached into my coat pocket and checked my phone. A text had already arrived from my assistant upstairs. "They declined the gift. Shall I notify you?" I typed back with one hand, "No. Let it be." Verena didn't look back. She returned to her seat beside my father, where she poured herself another drink as if rejecting kindness was as routine as brushing lint from her blazer. Miguel stood about 10 feet away, hands behind his back, eyes surveying the room like a seasoned sentinel. I passed by him slowly. Our eyes met for only a second, but I saw it: recognition, empathy, restraint. He didn't say anything. But he remembered. He always did. The first year I bought into the hotel group, he was one of the first people I promoted. Not because he asked. Not even because he was the most qualified. But because he saw me once when I was invisible and said, "Ma'am, do you need help finding your way?" A question no one in my family had ever asked. I continued toward the back office hall, my heels clicking in rhythm like a ticking clock no one else could hear. Once inside the executive suite control room, I opened my iPad and pulled up the hotel's internal admin panel. Suite 2701 was active. The profile listed under Isidore's foundation account. Nothing unusual. Clean history. No complaints, yet. I tapped back into the personnel archive. There they were. Alton Vale. Verena Vale. Still marked as honorary advisors to the Foundation's hospitality board. Still listed with inactive access badges. Still clinging to roles that hadn't meant anything in years, but weren't officially revoked either. Not yet. Their files were still active. But I had started drafting their exits long ago. The following morning slipped in behind gray clouds, the kind of day Chicago often offers in late November, unapologetically cold, but not yet cruel. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours, but exhaustion never really showed on me anymore. It had become part of my wardrobe, like another layer of composure I wore out of habit. By the time I reached the lobby, the day staff had replaced the night shift. The air smelled faintly of coffee and furniture polish. Guests whispered over breakfast menus, their chatter blending into the low hum of business. My family, unfortunately, had also decided to rise early. I spotted them near the front desk, already creating their usual scene. The concierge, fresh-faced, polite to a fault, was explaining something to my father. "Mr. Vale, it seems there's been a small mix-up with the room assignments. The suite listed under your name is temporarily unavailable due to a system error." My father's voice cut like a blade. "We paid in advance. We expect the best, young man. Not excuses." The concierge nodded quickly, fumbling with the tablet. "Of course, sir. We're arranging a temporary suite on the 13th floor while we correct the issue. It's the same size and—" My mother interrupted with a sigh so sharp it could have sliced through glass. "This place used to be managed better. How disappointing." I watched from across the marble floor, half hidden by a column. I didn't feel anger anymore, only distance, a sort of detached curiosity, like a scientist observing a failed experiment. They never changed, they just rehearsed their arrogance with new audiences. The concierge apologized again, offering them complimentary breakfast. My father waved him off. "No need. Just fix it." I walked toward the elevator bank, my pass card in hand. The executive floor had a separate system, accessible only through a coded badge. Normally, the sensor flashed green for me before I even touched it. Today, it didn't. I tried again. Nothing. The panel blinked red. "Access denied." Behind me, a low chuckle. "Tobrin. Of course. Guess even janitors try to sneak up sometimes," he said, leaning against the pillar with a cup of coffee that probably wasn't his. His grin was too confident to be spontaneous. It was planned, a performance for whoever might be watching. I turned slowly. "You're still mixing charm with ignorance, I see. Dangerous cocktail." He lifted a brow. "Still touchy, little sister. I didn't recognize you at first yesterday. You blend right in with the help." "That's the point," I said evenly. "The help makes this place run." He laughed, shaking his head. "You always had a chip on your shoulder. Guess some things don't change." I didn't rise to it. Arguing with Tobrin was like trying to drain a swamp with a teaspoon. You just end up sinking deeper in the muck. Instead, I stepped aside, pulled out my tablet, and opened the internal control dashboard. It didn't take long to find what I needed. Someone had manually revoked my elevator clearance overnight. Only one user had the authority to make that adjustment. Isolde Vale, Director of Social Experience and PR. I should have guessed. The woman had built her career off presentation, always ready to make someone else look small if it made her shine brighter. I toggled through the data log, my fingers moving without hesitation. The timestamp was 2:17 a.m. She'd done it while pretending to be asleep upstairs. Typical. My reflection in the tablet screen looked calm, but under that still surface, something started to simmer. This wasn't just a petty act, it was a message. A reminder that, in her mind, I didn't belong here. Fine. Let her think that. For now. I closed the tablet and slipped it back into my bag. When I looked up, Miguel was standing a few feet away. His expression was unreadable, professional, but his eyes searched mine the way people do when they sense a storm forming. "Everything all right, Ms. Vale?" he asked quietly. It was the first time all week anyone had said my last name with the respect it deserved. For a heartbeat, I considered answering honestly. That I was tired of being erased, tired of swallowing grace for the sake of civility, tired of pretending that blood still meant family. But honesty wasn't what this moment required. Not yet, I said instead, voice calm. But we're getting there. He nodded once. If you need anything, I'll find you, I replied. And I meant it. As he walked away, I watched the line of his shoulders, solid, steady, loyal. Miguel was one of the few people who understood that silence doesn't equal weakness. It's strategy. I turned back toward the elevator. Another guest approached, slid her card, and the light blinked green instantly. The doors opened. She smiled politely before stepping inside. Even elevators obey the ones with the right credentials. But I built this system. I knew its codes, its layers, its bones. And if someone thought locking me out would keep me in my place, they hadn't learned a damn thing about me. It was time to remind them. By late evening, the restaurant had taken on a golden warmth that almost convinced you the world outside wasn't sharp and cold. Soft music floated from the pianist in the corner, candles flickered gently, and wine glasses shimmered beneath overhead lanterns. The kind of ambience people pay extra for, not because the food tastes better, but because it gives the illusion that everything is just right. My family sat 2 tables over, in a corner they hadn't reserved but claimed with the certainty of people who always assumed space belonged to them. The staff, too polite to correct them, had simply rearranged place cards and gone along with it. I'd chosen a seat facing them, not because I wanted to look at them all night, but because I didn't trust myself not to if I didn't. It was easier to manage my emotions when I kept them in plain sight. Verena lifted her glass in a poised hand, her voice rising above the din just enough to draw attention. To Tobrin, the one who's always been our rock. The entire table raised their glasses, Isolde, of course, with one hand and her phone in the other, already mid-live stream. Family first, always, she chirped, tagging the hotel's social page like it was a campaign slogan. I watched it all unfold as if I were seated in a theater, watching a play I'd once auditioned for but had been told I didn't fit the part. Tobrin, ever the golden son, looked down bashfully and said, "Mom, stop. I just try to do what's right for all of us." All of us. I murmured under my breath, swirling the untouched wine in my glass. I was part of us once. Or at least I thought I was. Now, I was the shadow next to their spotlight, present, but never acknowledged. A young server, maybe no older than 20, approached cautiously. She bent slightly toward me, eyes scanning my face. "I know who you are," she whispered. Her voice wasn't mocking or fearful. Just honest. I met her gaze and smiled softly. "Please don't say anything." Her expression faltered, then she nodded, as if she understood more than she should. She refilled my water and moved on. It's strange, being recognized when you've spent years being ignored. Part of me wanted to grab her by the hand and say thank you. Another part just wanted to disappear again. From the corner of my eye, I saw Isolde glance toward me, her gaze grazing past like wind on skin, barely felt, entirely dismissive. I opened my tablet and tapped into the hotel's internal messaging system. A single message waited for me. "Why haven't you confronted them?" I didn't recognize the sender. Maybe it was a staff member watching quietly. Maybe it was someone from corporate. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the universe asking the question I'd buried too deep to face. I typed back. I don't react to chaos. I let it fall into place. I clicked over to my private notes and typed another line. No flourish. No drama. Just one promise to myself. The next line they cross will be the last. After dinner, I made my way to the bar, not because I needed another drink, but because it gave me an excuse to sit with my back straight and my silence louder than any accusation. Isolde strutted in a few minutes later, her heels clicking like punctuation marks on the polished floor. She stopped when she noticed me, tilted her head like a cat sizing up a bird, and smiled. That smile she reserved for people she didn't think mattered. Sorry, she said, almost sweetly. Do you work here or? I met her eyes, let the pause linger just long enough to be uncomfortable. Would it change anything if I did? She laughed, short and sharp. Guess not. I finished the last sip of my drink, placed the glass gently on the napkin, and left my name off the tab. It wasn't about hiding. It was about timing. As I stood, I glanced once more at the family still gathered by the fire, laughing over Tobrin's latest podcast appearance, clinking glasses, their voices echoing off the high ceilings. They wanted silence. I gave it to them, so they could hear themselves echo. The night folded over Chicago like a heavy velvet curtain, quiet but suffocating. I stayed at the corner table long after my family left the restaurant, letting the candle burn itself down until the wax clung to the rim like frost. My glass sat empty. The silence I had given them had done its job. They were comfortable again, convinced I had retreated. But silence is not surrender. It's strategy. When I finally stood, the restaurant was almost empty. The hallway outside the private dining room led straight back to the main lobby. I could already hear the echo of my mother's voice before I saw her. Sharp. Controlling. The kind of voice that expects obedience just from existing. She's been following us, she hissed to one of the front desk clerks. Watching us. Taking notes, for all I know. I slowed my steps. The tone wasn't new, it was the same one she used whenever she needed a villain to keep herself righteous. The clerk looked bewildered. Ma'am, we have security systems in place. No guest is being. Verena cut him off, pointing. There. That's her. Every head in the lobby turned toward me. My father was by the concierge desk, shoulders squared, the same old authority radiating from him like heat. He'd spent his entire life commanding rooms, whether anyone wanted him to or not. Security, he barked, his voice echoing off the marble. Remove that woman. She's disturbing my family. I stopped walking. My heels clicked once more against the floor, then silence. I felt the weight of every eye, some curious, others amused, a few sympathetic. I met my father's glare head-on. Disturbing your family. I repeated, my voice steady. Or reminding it who actually built this place. That didn't land the way I wanted it to. He wasn't listening. He never had. Miguel, he shouted. Do your job and escort her out. From behind the security podium, Miguel appeared, tall and calm as ever. For a moment, his gaze flicked from my father to me, then back again. I could see the conflict in his face. He knew who I was. He also knew what it would look like if he hesitated. Sir, he said evenly, let's lower our voices. There are guests present. Then do something about her. Verena snapped. She's been eavesdropping, lingering, making us uncomfortable. I knew she'd turn up eventually. I knew it. People began whispering, small, biting murmurs carried by curiosity. I took one small breath and straightened my shoulders. "Do your job, Miguel," I said quietly. He froze. I gave the smallest nod, the kind only he would catch. He understood. The next few seconds stretched long and fragile. Then, with professional composure, he walked toward me. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but heavy, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." "Of course," I replied. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't even glance back at my parents. Instead, I turned and began walking toward the front doors. Miguel fell into step behind me, keeping just enough distance to make it look like procedure. The whispers followed. "Who is she? Must have done something. She looks too calm for that." Someone lifted a phone. I caught the glint of the camera lens, the reflection of chandelier light in its surface. Fine. Let them record. Each step echoed louder than the last. My pulse, though steady, felt like a drum in my ears. I reached the double doors at the entrance, pushed them open, and paused beneath the cold draft spilling in from the street. For the first time in years, I looked back at my family, standing under the hotel lights, framed by opulence they didn't own, power they never earned. My father's jaw was set, my mother's lips pressed tight, Isolde smirking like a spectator at someone else's downfall. I didn't hate them. Hate gives too much energy to the wrong people. Instead, I memorized the sight of them exactly as they were, loud, certain, and completely blind. Miguel came closer, his hand hovering just behind me as if escorting a VIP instead of an intruder. He leaned slightly, his voice low enough only I could hear. "You sure?" "I'm sure," I murmured. "Finish the performance." He nodded, stepping past me to pull the door wider. I stepped into the night air, the chill cutting through the last bit of restraint I had been carrying all evening. The automatic doors closed behind me with a soft hiss. It wasn't a walk of shame. It was an exodus. The city outside felt awake, alive in a way the marble lobby never could. A few guests were still arriving from evening events, taxis lined up against the curb. One woman in a red coat stared at me curiously, perhaps wondering what kind of story she'd just witnessed. I didn't offer her one. Instead, I took the long way around the building, entering through the rear staff corridor. The security lights buzzed overhead, and the scent of cleaning chemicals filled the hallway. I knew this place better than anyone else. It was my design, my oversight, my discipline that kept it running long after others forgot its origin. In the staff elevator, I swiped my badge. This one worked. The doors slid open, welcoming me into the quiet metal box where no one could see me anymore. I leaned back against the mirrored wall and finally exhaled. My reflection stared back, calm, collected, almost detached. The calm before thunder. I took out my iPad, the faint glow lighting the small space. 2 options blinked on the screen. Terminate employee account, Alton Vale. Terminate employee account, Verena Vale. My finger hovered over the first button. Not yet. If I pressed it now, it would be revenge. What I wanted was resolution. I slid the device into my bag, closed my eyes for just a second, and let the elevator hum around me. The floor number blinked upward, steady and patient. Some people need to see walls crumble to learn they built nothing. If they wanted war, they should have picked someone who still needed their approval. They didn't realize yet, they were walking into their own audit. The morning after the lobby spectacle, I stayed off the hotel floors. I needed space to think and silence to settle. Some people mistake silence for retreat. Others mistake it for permission. My family did both. But by that afternoon, they'd learn exactly what silence from me meant. After a short coffee in my private suite, I took the service corridor down to the executive lounge, avoiding the main elevator just in case Isolde had more tricks to pull. The hallway was quiet, save for the soft hum of the floor lights. When I turned the corner near the lounge, something on the floor caught my eye. The trash bin near the wall was tipped halfway over. Probably the overnight crew had missed it. Paper curled at its base. I stepped closer, half curious, half instinctual, and froze. There it was. The photo I had mailed them 5 years ago. The only printed copy I still had, folded neatly into a holiday card with my own handwriting inside. I'd signed it with nothing more than "thinking of you, Nora." They hadn't responded. Not then. Not ever. I assumed they'd tossed it the moment they saw my name. I just didn't expect to find it discarded in the very hotel I built. The picture was creased across my face. Everyone else in the photo was untouched, Alton's arm around Verena, Isolde beaming at center. Me. Folded, literally and figuratively. I crouched, picked it up, held it for a second longer than I meant to. That's when I heard the voice. "I want to speak to corporate. Right now." Verena. Loud and urgent. I turned slowly and followed the sound, walking the length of the hallway into the main lobby. She was at the front desk, one hand gesturing wildly, the other gripping an old business card, the kind we discontinued years ago, but of course, she still carried it like some badge of entitlement. "We've been insulted," she went on. "We've been ignored, reassigned, embarrassed. This is unacceptable. I know the number still works. I want someone in charge on the phone now." I stepped into the lobby, slowly, without a word. Verena pressed the digits, phone to her ear. My phone, deep in the pocket of my blazer, vibrated once. She paused. Heard it ring. Tilted her head. Then looked up, eyes widening. I pulled my phone from my pocket and let it ring one more time. Then I answered. Vale, corporate office. Silence. I let it stretch. Just long enough. "You reached the right person," I said softly. Finally. It was like someone had slammed a door in a silent cathedral. The entire lobby stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Miguel straightened at the far wall. A woman in heels paused mid-step. And someone, bless their nosy instincts, began recording. Verena's lips parted, then closed again. She looked at her phone, then at me, like she'd swallowed something sour and didn't know how to spit it out. I didn't realize," she started. "No," I replied. "You never do." I walked past her, past Alton's confusion and Isolde's furrowed brows. I stepped behind the front desk, where I hadn't stood in a long time, and retrieved the room key tablet. "Guest 2701, I said clearly. "Status, unauthorized behavioral breach, verbal assault of staff, property reputation damage. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I tapped twice. Effective immediately, accounts associated with Alton and Verena Vale are terminated from all honorary, board-adjacent, or internal roles. Revoked access is in process. Miguel approached, standing beside the desk. Do you want security to assist with their checkout? I looked at him. No. Let them walk. I turned to the main lobby display screen, usually showing hotel events, ambient lighting schedules, or featured chef nights. I connected my tablet and tapped the final link. The screen refreshed. Large, bold letters appeared, followed by the company's leadership chart. Nora Vale, Executive Director, Aurelia Hotels. Murmurs rose like a slow tide. That was when the real unraveling began. Guests pointed. Some clapped, quietly at first. One man whispered, "Well, I'll be damned." Another guest pulled up their phone to verify the website. Alton took a step forward. "What is this?" "This," I said, "is an overdue audit." I kept my gaze locked on him. For gross misconduct, I continued, you and Verena Vale are no longer welcome on these premises in any official or honorary capacity. If you need assistance vacating your suite, front desk staff will be available for the next 10 minutes. You can't, Verena began. I already did. Their faces shifted, not just anger or confusion, but something deeper. Disbelief that the daughter they had dismissed could remove them without flinching. Isolde moved to speak, then stopped. I caught her eye just long enough to make sure she saw the final slide flash onto the screen. Disrespect has consequences. The message stayed up for 10 full seconds. Then I disconnected my tablet, stepped out from behind the desk, and faced the crowd. I never needed them to love me, I said, mostly to myself, but not low enough to miss. I only needed them to see who I became when they stopped pretending I existed. The elevator reached the top floor with a gentle chime, the kind that seemed designed not to disturb anyone's peace. A polite sound, almost apologetic. I stepped into the corridor, where silence pressed close and the thick carpet drank the sound of my heels. Behind me, the doors slid shut, a soft metallic breath sealing me off from everything below, the crowd, the murmurs, the flashbulbs, the polished cruelty of curiosity. Up here, the air was different. Thinner, cleaner, almost reverent. A place built for decisions that were supposed to feel monumental, yet always got reduced to the movement of a hand, a password, a signature. The folder in my grasp wasn't heavy. Paper never is. But meaning weighs differently. I had carried this one for years, through dinners where silence stretched like glass, through boardrooms where legacy was mistaken for relevance, through all those brittle smiles that said you should be grateful. Now it was only purpose that moved my steps. The door to the executive HR suite recognized my ID before I even touched the handle. Inside, the lights were dim but deliberate, every surface gleamed with sterile elegance. The desk lamp cast a clean circle over the terminal waiting in the center, screen glowing with the quiet patience of something that had no opinions, only commands. I set the folder down, placed my palm on the scanner. The system accepted me immediately. Nora Vale. Executive Director. A name that had once been theirs before it was mine. The personnel archive opened, and I typed in two names I could have written in my sleep. Alton Vale. Verena Vale. Still there. Still preserved. still rotting behind the glass casing of Honorary Advisory, Legacy Family Status. A title that sounded like reverence but was really wrought lacquered in gold. Legacy. That word again. It had been our family's currency long after merit ran out. A mask polished so brightly it blinded everyone who looked at it for too long. The records hadn't changed since 2019. That was the year their advisory titles had been renewed quietly. No duties, no oversight, just benefits. Sweet privileges, corporate cards, and the illusion of mattering. I opened the action log. Nothing. No sign of life. No trace of contribution. Just digital dust. My finger hovered only for a moment. Then I clicked revoke. The screen pulsed once, awaiting confirmation. Confirm. A prompt appeared. Executive authorization required. I typed my credentials with steady hands. The final warning filled the screen in cold, bureaucratic precision. Please sign to confirm permanent termination. This action cannot be undone. I didn't blink. Didn't flinch. I signed. The system acknowledged with a soft chime. The timestamp appeared, 8:21 a.m. That was the moment it became real, not in emotion, but in record. The moment the last unearned door closed, not with rage, but with structure. Relief came not as triumph, but as clarity. I wasn't dismantling them. I was cleaning the archive. I slipped the 2 white envelopes from the folder and tucked them into my bag. The air in the room seemed lighter, as if something toxic had finally been exhaled. When I stepped back into the hallway, I adjusted my coat, not for appearance but for ritual. My reflection in the dark glass looked almost like a stranger, a woman rebuilt out of consequence instead of inheritance. The elevator waited, patient as always. On the descent, the mirrored walls returned my gaze, steady and unsentimental. Somewhere below, the lobby hummed with life, with whispers that hadn't yet formed into sentences. The doors opened onto that hum. The air smelled faintly of espresso and speculation. I walked toward the concierge desk. Conversations faltered as I passed, the way birds fall silent when a shadow crosses their path. These, I said, placing the envelopes on the polished counter, are for the guests in suite 2701. Please see that they're delivered immediately. The young concierge nodded quickly, eyes wide with the knowledge that he was now part of something he didn't understand. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, I said, soft but absolute. As I turned away, motion caught at the edge of my vision. Across the lobby, near the breakfast bar, 2 familiar figures. Alton Vale, posture still imperial even when the crown had slipped. Verena beside him, hands wrapped around a coffee cup she would never drink. Her eyes found mine. For a breath, the years compressed. Then I looked past her, walked toward the exit. I paused only once, at the glass doors. My reflection waited there too, clean lines, clear gaze, a body no longer shrinking to fit a family silhouette. Behind me, paper tore. Alton, always impatient, ripping open the seal like a man expecting another check, another indulgence. Verena's movements were slower, she unfolded the letter as though it might disintegrate under truth. I didn't turn when I heard the gasp. Or the thud of something hard hitting marble. Or the stillness that followed, the kind that creeps in when a world ends but refuses to announce it. I didn't need to see their faces. I had already seen them, many times, in the mirror of my past. The letter spoke without cruelty. Termination for cause. Effective immediately. You are no longer affiliated with the Aurelia brand. All privileges revoked. Your presence is no longer welcome. The lobby's ambient murmur faded, replaced by the sound of consequence taking shape. The clink of a spoon pausing midair. The shuffle of a chair pulled slightly back. People were watching, of course. They always do when power changes hands. They just rarely recognize which way it moved. Tobrin, the head of communications, stood frozen by the front desk. Isolde, from legal, had that look of restrained shock, the one that hides admiration behind disapproval. I reached the elevator again, pressed the button, and waited. The lobby stayed motionless, as if waiting for some correction, some apology that would never come. The doors opened. I stepped inside alone. Through the narrowing slit of light, I saw Miguel, the operations chief, standing to the side. He didn't smile. Just gave a small nod. A gesture between those who had lived invisible long enough to recognize freedom when it arrived, even if it came dressed as silence. The elevator doors closed completely, sealing the scene like a chapter. No door slammed. It shut with a whisper, precise, deliberate, final. And in that whisper lived everything I had wanted for years, not revenge, not spectacle, just the quiet sound of a dynasty ending by its own hand. The hush of the elevator lingered longer than it should have after the doors closed. I remained standing, not because I didn't want to sit, but because my body had forgotten how. Every cell in me had been holding tension for so long, it didn't quite know what to do with release. I walked slowly into the penthouse. The lights were dim, just as I left them. The city stretched beyond the glass like a lit constellation, no stars, just movement, stories, people who had no idea what just happened on the floors below. My coat slipped from my shoulders onto the arm of the couch without thought. I reached for the small kettle on the sideboard and filled it with water. The act felt mechanical, grounding. The sound of boiling, the steam, the quiet. I chose a chamomile blend, something without caffeine, something that wouldn't remind me of control. I poured the water, watched it bloom in the cup, then sat in the armchair by the window. The one I had always imagined using for reflection, but never really had. My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted the cup. It wasn't fear. It was release. Every muscle in my body was waking up to the fact that it didn't have to brace anymore. That the people who tried to write me out of my own story had finally been shown the margins where they belonged. My phone vibrated from the side table. Just once. I almost didn't check it. But something nudged me to. It was a message. Rowan, you kept your promise. And now you're free. Proud of you. A lump formed in my throat before I could stop it. Not sadness. Not even happiness. Just realness. That rare kind of truth that doesn't ask permission to land. I leaned back into the chair, letting my head rest against the soft cushion behind me. The last time I heard Rowan say anything like that was nearly a decade ago. Back when I had nowhere to sleep. When my savings were gone, and my parents had just, without hesitation, sold my car behind my back. Claimed it was helping me cut distractions. I remember sleeping in the storage closet at Rowan's first boutique hotel. There was a blanket, a single overhead bulb, and a stack of marketing flyers I used as a pillow. He found me there one night. Didn't say anything at first. Just handed me a better blanket and a cup of instant coffee. Then, as he turned to leave, he said, "No one throws you out of your own story. Not unless you let them." And I never forgot it. I took another sip of tea, and my eyes wandered across the room to the credenza where I had placed the family photo. The same one I found crumpled, discarded, folded at the edges in the trash. I had flattened it out. Smoothed the creases with my palm. Now, it sat framed. But not with glass. I hadn't added that part yet. I stood and walked to it. Picked it up gently. They all looked so polished in that photo. So sure of themselves. I, in contrast, had been slightly off-center, my smile just a little unsure. That was the last year I believed I might be accepted as I was. I looked at my younger face, the way my eyes followed the others instead of the camera. Always looking for cues. Always trying to fit the frame someone else was holding. "I forgive you," I whispered. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even planned. It just came out. But that doesn't mean I'll open the door again. I placed the photo back down and opened the drawer of the credenza. Laid the frame inside. Not to hide. But to archive. Some memories aren't for display. They're for proof. The next morning, the press had already gotten wind of the incident. News travels fast when it's laced with inheritance, family drama, and a viral video of a daughter firing her own parents without raising her voice. Some articles called me stone cold. Others called me Grace under fire. Most didn't know what to call me at all. One clip made the rounds more than others. A guest had recorded the exact moment I said, "I never needed them to love me. I only needed them to see who I became when they stopped pretending I existed." The caption under the video. She didn't raise her voice once. But she raised the standard. I didn't comment. I didn't repost. I didn't explain. I went about my meetings. I approved a new hiring policy. I signed off on renovations to the rooftop bar. I answered emails. But somewhere in the quieter parts of me, something settled. A thread that had always been pulled tight finally eased. Not gone. Not forgotten. But no longer holding me hostage. I thought I would feel triumphant. I didn't. I felt still. Like someone who had finally closed the last open tab in her mind. Like someone who didn't need the final word, because the chapter had already ended. Some stories don't end with forgiveness. They end with freedom. Some stories don't end with fireworks, they end with clarity. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming identity, recognizing your worth when the people closest to you refused to. Nora didn't need a war. She just needed a signature. Have you ever been dismissed by the very people who should have stood by you? Share your story in the comments, someone out there might need to hear it. And if you found power in Nora's silence, subscribe